Hey, welcome back to Structure Fishing. I'm Jim Shell with another lake breakdown. We are talking about Lake Shelbyville. Lake Shelbyville is located in south central Illinois. Here's Decatur, here's Springfield, St. Louis is over here just for some reference, and here is Shelbyville. Shelbyville, I believe, is the second most popular lake in the state of Illinois. For boating, I would say the Channel Lakes is the number one in Illinois. And I don't know for sure, but I would guess that Lake Shelbyville is the second most popular lake in the state of Illinois for boating and as well for fishing. It receives a lot of boating in the summer months, and it is a very good fishing lake, a very well known fishing lake. The primary species that is sought after in Shelbyville is crappie, and I would say it's probably a four-way tie for second place for walleye, sauger, and white bass and largemouth bass. All four of those species. It's a very good multi-species lake. And I'm going to go over the primary structures and some really good secondary structures in the lake. Once again, this lake was built in 1970. I'm no, expert Shelbyville, but I have fished it plenty of times that I know where all the, primary structures are at and most of the good secondary structures. Um, this was the first reservoir that I fished back when I started structure fishing in 1987. And I would probably fished here 35, 40 times since then. I'd go 3, 4, 5 years not fishing here. Then I'd go down here and fish it 2 or 3 times uh, during the summer, maybe for the next 2 summers, and then you know I'm off everywhere as fishing all these different lakes. So it may be 2 or 3 years in between me coming down here, but when I do fish it, these structures have been very productive all these years that I'm about to show you here. And I have fished the lake more recently, quite a bit in the last 6 or 7 years. I might tell you a couple of stories as well as we get into it. But let's talk about watercolor. For the most part, it's a medium yellow-green lake for the most part. Sometimes it'll be, as you can expect in any reservoir towards the headwaters, you'll have a little shade darker yellow-green, and as you get closer to the dam, it may be a little bit lighter. But on average, it might be like a medium dark yellow green up in the headwaters, maybe a medium yellow green mid lake, and maybe a light to medium yellow green down by the dam. But typically, you can expect fairly good watercolor for this reservoir. Now, when I fish this lake, I'm usually targeting the walleye and saugers, and later in the summer, I will target the largemouth bass. But I'm going to go over these structures mostly in the terms of the walleyes and saugers, but I have caught white bass on many of these structures and largemouth bass. I'll point that out as I break this out. Now, as many of you know, that walleye, saugers, and white bass are migratory species, which means in the spring they'll make runs towards the headwaters. So when I fish this lake, since I am targeting walleye and saugers, I'll spend I'll start my fishing earlier in the spring up towards the main lake, and as the summer progresses, I'll work my way down, you know, to the main lake, the middle of the lake, etc. Here. Uh, the earliest I've ever fished this lake is probably been early May, but I have no doubt that if I came down here in the month of April and even the second half of March, that I would expect to catch walleye and saugers up this major feeder creek here. This is I think it's the Kowalski River, something like that, and this is the major feeder creek branch here. But the earliest, I typically don't start fishing here until about the early mid-May, and when I start up in the headwaters here, there's a boat ramp right here, so I launch over here, and I've really never gone past this bridge over here, to be honest with you. But let's go over here, and we're going to go over the major structure situations and maybe some secondary structures. So as I start over here, I come out over here. We really don't have any structure situations till we come right over here. And you can sort of see the main channel comes right up against this long bar or this long break line over here. And here we have our first major structure situation. Uh, I've caught a lot of walleyes and saugers, and depending on the year, white bass. White bass levels, populations tend to fluctuate. You'll have really heavy, big population of white bass a couple of years, and then the numbers will drop, and then they come back. But when the numbers are good for white bass, I'll get a lot of white bass on this structure here. But it's been a consistent producer for me for walleye and saugers for many, many years. And why this is a primary structure? Because it has immediate access to the channel. Any structure where you've got a decent break line, depth-wise, goes into the main channel is going to be a good structure. And this is a fairly long break line here. This is maybe at least 1/8 of a mile long, if I had to guess. I could measure it here, but I don't want to waste time. But it's pretty good break line here. And it's a good sized structure. And I've caught that definitely worth checking out earlier in the season. And after the walleye and saugers you're done using here, you can usually come back here and catch your fair share of white bass. But here's our first major structure situation right here. And then we go down over here. Now you might, I'm just gonna, it's a lot of water here, 11,000 acres. There's a lot of smaller structures that could be productive. You're gonna see me. A lot of people are gonna be wondering, like, Jim, how come you're not talking about this break line here? How come you're not talking about this hump here? I'm just going over the major structure situations and the really obvious secondary structures as well too here. So there's number one right over here. We're going down over here. I would not call this a primary structure, but I would call it a good secondary structure. You got this big hump here with a long finger coming off the side here. And the reason this isn't a primary structure because it doesn't have access to the main channel, immediate access to the main channel. There's a flat between the main channel and the structure. You will get fish here. I have caught occasional walleyes and saugers and schools of white bass here, but it's not as good of a structure as this one here, which has immediate access to the channel. So this is a good secondary structure, and it's worth checking out, and you will, you got a good chance of catching some fish here as well too. All right, so we have one primary and one secondary structure. Let's keep on going down over here. Nothing much until you get over here. This channel comes up really close to here, and then it swings out. To be honest with you, I never really spent a lot of time fishing it, but this bar sort of peters out. It gets a little flatter here. I would say you've got, as Buck would call this trolling water. I would troll this, see if you find any fish on here. If you do, then you can, pinpoint them and start casting to them. But I've caught maybe some schools of white bass on this thing. I don't think I really got any walleye or saugers here, but this is a structure situation. You may check out trolling, but it's not a major structure situation. All right, now you come over here, and this channel comes really close to the shore here. It's very steep, shallow drop off, and it comes out, and then you look at this. You got this big bar. Now let me tell you one thing about Navionics here. Navionics map is, I would probably classify it as fair on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being it's a excellent job mapping it. I would say they did this is about a 5 to a 6. It's going to show you all the major structures, but the details are going to be a little bit off. For example, I know this is all flat on top of here. It doesn't you don't have 12, 14 feet here. You probably have it out over here, and this is probably all like maybe 7, 8 feet at the most over here. But it is accurate in showing that you have a very distinct break line over here, around over here, and back over here. And this is probably one of the most popular structures in the lake. It's a pretty obvious structure here. You got the main channel now comes out and it goes away, and right where it comes over here, this is probably the contact point. Matter of fact, I think it was the second or third time I ever fished this reservoir. I was by myself. It was the weekend after Labor Day weekend in 1988. I'm pretty sure that was the weekend. I remember it. And it was probably my biggest walleye at the time that I've caught, or almost caught, I should say. I was trolling a 100 series spoon plug on an extra long line because it broke at about 16 feet. So I had a really, really long line out, just bumping it at 16 feet over here. And I had a big walleye hit me. I was by myself, and I had him in and out of the net at least 3 times. He was probably really close to 30 inches, if not a solid 30-inch fish. He was skinny. If I got him in the boat, I don't think he would have weighed more than 6.5 pounds because he was so thin. But it was a long fish. He was in and out of the net 3 times at least, and the last time I had him in the net, the spoon plug got caught on the side of the net, and he was able to get some leverage. And when he shook, he broke free of the plug, and I lost him. But I have caught my fair share of really nice walleyes and saugers here. But it's probably one of the most popular structures in the lake. Ever since they came out with these HD maps, it's pretty obvious, spot people come here. I'd say 4 out of 5 times I'm fishing here, there's always one boat, if not 2, if not 3 boats right over here. But that's fine. If you have boats fishing here, rarely ever do you see any boats fishing this break line going this way. And I've caught many walleye and saugers off this break line going this way too, as well as crappies too. I fished here. I don't target crappies that often, but there was a couple trips we came down and we target crappies, and we were catching walleye and saugers here. Then we started fan casting up on top of the break, on top of the bar here, and it must be a really good spot for spawning crappies because we caught crappies all over this area here. Now, on the backside of this bar, to be honest with you, I don't recall, and I'm not sure why, that I ever spent much time fishing this backside. I checked it out a couple of times, never got fish there where I was actively catching fish here and here. But I would not rule it out. I would make a run down here too and check this out. So we have our second major structure situation here now, and several secondary structure situations. Let's keep on going down. This is the Findlay Road Bridge. It's the only bridge that crosses the reservoir over here, just to give you some bearings. You can see by looking at the map here, there's a pretty distinct, really big bar that comes out around and over here. And to be honest with you, I recall fishing it a few times years ago and never really caught any fish there, so I never really fished it much. But I think it'd be worth checking out. It could be just the time that I was out there. I just hit it at the wrong time, at the wrong day. But I would not call this a major structure situation because just this part of it right here goes to the main channel. It's pretty deep, but I'd like to go back and work this again, see if I can find anything out. But I would say you've got not a primary, but a structure situation here. But go down over here. That's why I say this contour map isn't very accurate, because this is all very shallow here. There is a very big bar like the map indicates here, but you don't have these steps on top of it. This is all, if I recall right, as shallow as 2-3 feet on top. Most of it's 4, 5, 6 feet at the most. It's a very shallow break line until you come over here. But this structure is worth talking about. You can sort of see the main channel comes right over here, right up against this bar, and then it comes out and it turns, comes over here. But that main channel comes right up against this structure right over here, and that what makes the structure good is that main channel comes over here. And you do have this one little short bar like the map indicates over here. It is somewhat accurate as far as showing you that you got a bar here. And this break line is roughly, I want to say, 15, 16 feet before it drops into the main channel. I won't really call this a primary structure because it's so small, but it's a very good structure. I've caught nearly every species on the lake on this structure here. It's a small structure. You could troll it, but you're much better off because since it's so small, put the boat right on top of the bar here, and you can fan cast and cast to all of this here. I've caught walleye, saugers, white bass, largemouth bass, all on this structure here. Very good structure. And when the one time I fished it in the spring, we checked the shallows, casting up here, and we caught. Actually, this was a very good spot for us for crappie. There were a lot of crappie we're catching up up in this area here too. So, although this isn't a primary structure, it's a really good secondary, smaller structure to fish. All right, now let's keep on going down over here. You've got this, once again, this map isn't very accurate. This is mostly a very shallow big bar that comes out over here. You will have schools of white bass using it, but you're not going to find, you'll find straggler, walleye, and saugers on it. You're not going to really find schools of fish on it because it breaks too shallow and the main channel is a little bit too far away from it. But down at the end over here, you've got the side feeder creek channel goes right up against this point over here. It is fairly shallow, but since the main feeder creek channel comes over here, you might find some deeper breaks. It's worth checking out. I have caught some walleye and saugers off the end of it over here, and I did check out this feeder creek channel, and I did catch straggler walleyes and saugers back in this feeder creek as well too. Once again, like Buck says, a fish can be caught anywhere, any place, anytime by anyone. And that's definitely true in Lake Shelbyville. You can probably there's so many structures that I haven't gone over that hold fish, but I'm trying to focus on the major structure situations where you've got the best chance of catching not only fish but tying into a school of fish. So once again, I mean, you can catch straggler fish throughout in this feeder creek channel here too. Let's go out over here. I never really fished this, but according to the map here, you got a very distinct little narrow, short little bar coming out over here. Looks like you might have a deeper break lines coming off the end of it here. I would check that out. It's not a major structure situation, but you've got a lot of areas here that, are potentially can hold fish, and that's one of them right over here. All right, let's keep on going down. Once again, you do have a very distinct bar over here, and the main channel comes in right over it, but it is fairly shallow. According to the map, it's about 11 feet. I think it's shallower than that. But it's worth checking out. You could have fish, especially white bass on this big bar over here. If this breaks deeper, say 12, 13, even deeper, 14, 15, 16, the deeper it breaks, the better chance you're going to have of finding some nice walleye and saugers on it. I'm not sure I'd say this is a major structure situation, but it's something that you would need to check out. And then you got a little break line. This is probably a feeder creek channel that come back in here. You probably have a break line going down over here. It's something you would check out. Now, in past years, although I have not fished here in quite some time, but years ago, I was trolling here for bass, and I have caught bass. You can see you got cuts. You got a cut here, or a wash. You got a cut or a wash here, one over here. I'd have caught a fair share of largemouth bass fishing this, and I'm sure you'd probably pick up walleye and saugers on it too. I wouldn't call it a primary structure, but it's a structure I would worth check out, especially trolling. And if you find any fish trolling, then spot lock on them and or try to pinpoint them and get them on the cast. But this is potentially spot over here. Let's go further down over here. Now here's a really good spot here. Matter of fact, before I talk about this spot, let me show you why I'm thinking about it now. In Buck Perry's home study course, his volume 7, I think it is, Mapping Interpretation Part 1. If you have the home study course, and I'm sure many of you do, and if you don't, go out and buy it. It's best investment you'll make in your fishing world here, education. But in volume 7, part 1, right here, page 32, Buck doesn't put the lake names on here. I recognize that this is Lake Shelbyville, where he gives an example, basic contour map, and this is what the map looked like before Navionics mapped it. It was 10-foot contours, 10, 20, 30. But Buck used this as an example. I'm not going to go through this, but he asked questions down here, about, how to interpret it, where he would spend his time fishing on here. So you want to pull out your home study course, take a look at that. This area that Buck has is this area right here. And this is probably one of the best sections of the lake for fishing. Let's go over the structures that are in this area. Here's a primary structure. The main channel comes right up against this structure here. Right up against here. You've got a really good break line, and it's a I want to say it averages 14 to 16 feet deep before it breaks into the channel, so that's a good depth. It's going to hold fish on here. And this is a structure that holds fish throughout the summer, throughout the early summer, midsummer, late summer, etc. I've caught many walleye, saugers, and some really nice white bass off these structures over here. And the map is fairly accurate in telling you that you got a little cut over here that does exist, and you got another cut over here. But since this breaks into the main channel, it's a very good structure, and it breaks the break line is at a pretty good depth, about 14, 15, 16 feet here. So you got a great structure fishing over here. One thing that this break line does continue fairly good. This is one area that the map isn't quite too accurate, because you can follow the break line. If I'm not mistaken, comes more out over here before it sort of peters out. So that you got a really good spot, primary structure over here. And then you got this is the biggest feeder creek of the whole lake right here. I think it's called Wolf Creek, if I'm not mistaken. And Buck sort of says you've got to sort of treat these as a lake within a lake. And I think there's a population of walleye and saugers that make a spawning run up this creek over here. I'm speculating. There's a main access boat ramp right over here. And I'm guessing that maybe they dump these walleyes and saugers over here, and maybe that's why they make a spawning run, or why you find so many fish up in this branch, especially in the spring. I've caught May up through mid-June a lot of good walleye and sauger fishing. Let me go over here. You come out over here. This break's very shallow. I've caught some straggler fish here, but you don't have, it's just straggler fishing here. You come over here, you've got a sharper break, sort of a break line over here. You can get some fish over here. It's an area definitely to check out, although I wouldn't say it's a primary structure situation. But you come on over here, you got two distinct bars that come over here, and they drop right. I'm almost certain that they drop right into the main feeder creek channel. This is an excellent structure. There's a small structure, but you got like back-to-back bars here, and I've caught walleye on saugers on both of these bars. Matter of fact, one of the first YouTube videos I ever uploaded, if you go back to my videos on the channel here, sort them by date, by the oldest, I want to say the second and third video that I ever uploaded on YouTube, 10, 11, 12 years ago, I can't remember. I was fishing these two bars, go over here, going back and forth, catching walleye and saugers. And these bars have been consistent producers of walleyes and saugers for the last, 12 years plus. So you've got a really good structure situation here. You got another good structure situation here. And over here, I haven't fished here that much, but this is another good structure. I just don't know why I haven't checked it out that much. But you got the main channel comes right up against here, right up against all this, and you've got all these, according to the map here, you got all these little humps. You got a nice break line. It's all connected by a break line, but you got like a hump here, little cut that comes in over here. This is all worth checking out. The couple of times I have fished here, I have gotten walleye and saugers, and tending a nice school of white bass here as well too. But so you got another structure situation over here. So you got this area here, you got this area here, you got a nice bar over here. You got right in this area here, you got three really good spots to check out. Now let's go further down over here. Now we're a little bit more than halfway. Well, actually we're at the lower third of the reservoir now. Um, it isn't until you get about right over here that you start getting some really good structures. I mentioned that I usually don't fish for largemouth bass out here until they're in their full summer pattern, which is typically the last week in June on an average summer. Definitely by the first week of July, these fish are in full summer pattern, and that's just my preference. I enjoy fishing for bass during these summer months when it's a little bit more challenging to catch because they are deeper. All the bass that I typically catch, and I want to say nearly every bass when I do bass fish here, I can't. I probably caught at the most a handful of small fish, but the vast majority of the bass that I am making contact with are adult fish. In adult fish, I mean that they're 3 pounds plus. I've caught many bass here that were in the 5.5 to 6 pound range. I think the biggest bass I've ever caught out of here were right at just at 6 pounds. But it's common to catch fours and fives here when you do find the bass. And this is where I start doing my bass fishing in the summer months. Um, Now, as you go further towards the dam, everything gets deeper. Now, the main channel here is 50 foot plus in the channel here, so um, it's not as important. I don't know how to say this. You can find some more productive structures outside the main channel just because you got so much depth. Although, if these structures go to the main channel, it's going to increase your odds a lot more. But because we've got so much depth here, um, you know, not showing, you got a feeder creek coming over here in here, so those bass are following the break lines on that feeder creek. But you can see here that you got these. This I can just tell you from experience that you've got a break line that varies between 15 to 20 feet deep that pretty much goes around all these structures all over here, back over here as well. This might be 20, 22 feet deep break line that comes out over here. And you'll have some distinct points and bars coming off these structures over here. So from here to here, I'm fishing all this stuff for bass, and it is some great bass fishing here in the summer months. But you have to fish deep, and if you're on these break lines, it could be worthwhile. Very good bass water right over here. We're pretty much at the almost at just about at the dam. The only other spot down here that I would say to check out is you've got a pretty big feeder cut over here, feeder creek over here, where you happen to have a marina over here, and I have caught some nice walleyes and saugers and largemouth off these bars, like this bar over here. Um, this map, like I say, is just so in accuracy. You have a more pronounced bar and break line around this area than what the map is showing here too, and I've caught some pretty nice walleye and largemouth back here as well too. So this area over here, if it breaks too shallow, too sharp, you're not going to find. It's not a high percentage structure at all. You come over here. Now these structures are pretty much short and deep, but I have caught occasionally big bass around them as well too. Boy, went over that, trying to go over that, a little bit quick for you, but we just went over most of the lake here, and we've got maybe 4 or 5 major structure situations. We probably found another 4, 5, 6 secondary structure situations. There are a lot of other structures that are present. Really didn't go over that. I'm sure you'll find hold fish, but I just try to give you a quick breakdown of the lake here. Tell you a couple of quick little stories, or well, I guess one, well, yeah, maybe a couple different stories here. I would probably fish here, a couple years in a row, 2 or 3 trips each year. Then I'm off fishing somewhere else, and 3, 4, 5 years would pass by, and I'd come down and fish it again. Um, I came down, and this lake is special to me for a couple of reasons. Casey, this was in, I wrote it down here so I wouldn't forget, when was that trip? It was May 21st in 2011 that I bought Casey with. And this was the year 2011 when Casey was 6 years old, where he really got into fishing, when the fishing bug really bit him when he was 6 years old. I took him fishing with me, on previous trips, but when he got tired or didn't seem like he was enjoying it, I didn't push it on him. I stopped and we went in. But this was his first trip of 2011 when he was 6 years old, and the fish were just moving good. We started fishing right here. We launched the boat. We stayed at the campground over here. We launched at the Wolf Creek, I think it is. We came out and we came over here and we were catching walleyes and saugers. And let me pull up a picture of Casey. I'll pull it up when I'm doing the editing over there, but there should be a picture of Casey where we're catching these uh, big saugers. Let me just go back a little bit. I started coming down here and catching these big saugers, and I'm like, why? I never caught saugers in the past here. And this was like in 2010, maybe the year before. So I started looking online, and I saw that the state, they called it a experimental stocking of saugers in '06, 7, and 8. And here it was, a couple years later in 2010, catching these nice saugers. And I'm like, holy, and they were nice. I mean, we're average size sauger we're catching was probably 17, 18 inches for saugers, pretty good fishing. I think we had a couple that were 21, almost pushing 22 inches. For a sauger, that's like, trophy size fish here. And when I got home, I was researching, like, what's going on? How come all of a sudden there's saugers in here? And that's when I read that the state started stocking experimental stocking of saugers. Well, this lake is really, uh, for some reason, the saugers really thrived in this lake. So I'm glad to see the state of Illinois acknowledging that, I believe. And they've had consistent or yearly stocking of saugers, I think, since 2010 now. And the sauger population is really good in this lake. I think that's definitely a big success. The walleye stocking is just so-so. They've been stocking this, I think, every year since they first started stocking fish in here. And it's just a fair walleye population, in my opinion. But for the limited stocking and time that they've been putting saugers in here, boy, they've really been doing good in this lake. But let me get back to that story I was telling you here. Um, so this is in May 21st, 2011. Casey is 6 years old. He just turned six. Um, and we were, we had about 4 or 5 saugers. We caught maybe one or two walleyes mixed in there. And Casey was super excited. And he says to me, Dad, we got to get our own TV show. He was so excited about catching all these fish. And, we had a good time. Uh, uh, we fished that Saturday, and then we fished that the following Sunday morning. Morning movement was over, so we left and we drove back home. And he was all pumped up about fishing. I said, "Hey, Casey," I says, "we're driving by this Clinton Lake was on the way home. I like, you want to check out another lake?" Being 6 years old, yeah, Dad, let's go. So we stopped at Clinton Lake, and the first pass we made on his one bar there, he got his first wiper ever. And that video was the first video I ever uploaded on YouTube. So take a look at that. I get a kick out of that. You can see the excitement in that 6-year-old, catching that fish. It was just an incredible weekend that I had fishing with him. But anyway, so he made the comment when we were out here catching so many saugers. Dad, we gotta get our own fishing show. So the next weekend, which I think was Memorial Day weekend, I came by myself. Casey couldn't come with me. I think he was just starting to play t-ball, baseball or something. So I was by myself that weekend, and I'm fishing out here, doing fairly good, catching walleye and saugers. And I'm thinking about how fun that trip was. Man, did we have a good time, I really enjoyed seeing him getting all excited. This is the first trip that you can tell the fishing bug really bit him. And I'm just thinking about that weekend, how good it was and how he made the comment about, "Yeah, we need our own TV show." And I thought, boy, that was really funny, him to say it. So it got me thinking. I'm like, boy, you know what? He's right. I says there's so many shows out there that are so bad. So I at that point I wasn't thinking I'm going to come out and do a TV show. I just thought to myself, you know what? There's someone needs to do a really good TV show. So I started thinking, and I'm fishing. I'm just daydreaming. I'm like, what would be a good TV show? I'm like, people never talk about the education. And Buck Perry's the father of modern day fishing. He's the one that coined all the words. You never hear anyone talking about, any, you hear them use the terms, but they don't tell you. You hear people say structure breaks and break lines, but they don't go into depth of what that really means. So I'm like, man, someone should do a show where they talk, you know, where they were really pushing and stressing structure, what a break line is, how weather affects fishing, how water affects fishing. I'm like, you know what? I'm thinking I'd really like to see that done on a TV show. Then I thought, what else would make a good TV show? Then I thought, you got to have like a classroom session. Have like a 2 or 3, 4 minute classroom session where you're going over this in a classroom setting, talking about structure, breaks, and break lines. And I'm just thinking about, yeah, that would be a pretty cool show. What else could you do? Then I had the idea of doing it. And you know what? You don't hear about the news anymore. There's a lot of good fishing news. How come you don't have a segment on the news? So I'm like, yeah, that would be a really good thing to have for a fishing show. So then when I started thinking about this, I'm like, you know what? I'd like to see this show. And I found out that I couldn't stop thinking about this. All I kept on thinking about, yeah, you have an on the water segment, have a classroom segment, have a news segment. Man, someone's got to do this. And 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks went by, and it's all I'm thinking about is this show. And I thought to myself, man, it got to the point. Then it got to the point where, yeah, I got to get this show done. I'm like, you know what? If I come up with a name for this show, then I'm going to see if I can't get this thing done. So I'm like, what can I call this show? What would this show be? The word fishing is in so many shows, Um, uh, so I thought it just dawned on me, structure fishing. That's what spoon plugging really is structure fishing. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to have to get the website for this show. But I'm like, structure fishing is a pretty common name. I'm sure that's used. So I went to GoDaddy. This is in 2011, summer of 2011. I type in the domain structure fishing, and it pops up available. And as soon as that popped up available, that's when, in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, here's a sign. I got the domain. I'm going for it. So I spent the rest of 2011, 2012, I didn't know a thing about editing videos, filming videos. This is when HD was just becoming popular, or the standard, I should say. So I went out in the winter of 2011, early 2012, got an HD camera. I don't want to bore you with all the rest of it, but I learned how to edit videos, how to do all the segments, and in February 1st of 2014, the first episode of Structure Fishing aired on Comcast TV. So I did the show for 2 years. It ran in early in 2014 and 2015, and it was really fun. 2 years putting it together, creating the show, creating the content, doing all that. But the idea came on Lake Shelbyville when I was fishing with Casey, when we were on this structure right here catching walleye and saugers, when Casey says, Dad, we got to get our own fishing show. So that's how structure fishing involved from that trip out there back in 2011 with Casey. So always enjoyed fishing Lake Shelbyville. A lot of good memories out there fishing the lake. Yeah, that's my lake breakdown on Lake Shelbyville. I'm going to try to do more of these lakes as well. So appreciate you. Thanks for watching.